You push open a warped wooden door, and you are greeted by the still, sticky Houston heat of June 1965. The small Montrose bungalow feels oddly muted, as though the air itself has been holding its breath for days. You notice blinds half drawn, a television buzzing with no sound, and mail piling up by the front entry. Something is wrong, and you know it from the moment your shoes touch the scuffed hardwood floor. You imagine the two residents, Fred and Edwina Rogers, should be here, maybe arguing over the evening news or planning the next afternoon's barbecue. Instead, their silence screams at you. You move toward the kitchen, led more by instinct than reason. When you tug the refrigerator door, the familiar suction noise seems louder than a thunderclap. Your eyes need a split second to translate the scene. Shelves packed not with leftovers, but with human limbs neatly stacked and wrapped like grocery carts. A head in a vegetable bin, torsos crammed beside cartons of milk. Your brain fights to process the grotesque orderliness. How can horror look so tidy? Police officers who answered a welfare call that Father's Day weekend asked themselves the same question. Fred Rogers, 81, and his 79-year-old wife Edwina had not answered phone calls for a few days. A concerned nephew sent patrolmen to knock. What they uncovered in that humble house rapidly became one of Houston's most baffling crime scenes. You might assume a massacre this brutal would paint the walls red, yet investigators found barely a drop of blood outside the bathroom. Someone had washed, drained, and dismembered both bodies with technical precision, then cleaned the workspace so thoroughly that forensic techs wondered whether the killer had professional surgical training. Even now, analysts debate the skill level, because bones were cut at joints, arteries were drained into the bathtub, and organs were wrapped in newspaper. Whoever did it spent hours, maybe an entire night, transforming two grandparents into anonymous meat, and then calmly placing them on cold metal racks. So where is the gore trail from bathroom to kitchen? Officers looked under rugs, inside gaps between floorboards, on the ceiling fan blades. Nothing. You picture the killer moving about with a bucket of bleach and disciplined patience, determined to erase the path from saw to fridge. One investigator later admitted that the scene felt more like a lab than a murder site. Houston Police Department had handled vicious homicides before, but they had never seen control on this level. Naturally, detectives wanted to meet the couple's only child, Charles Frederick Rogers, a 57-year-old Navy veteran and former seismologist. Charles rented a bedroom in the same house, yet led a life so private, even next-door neighbors doubted he existed. You think you know introverts. Charles communicated with his parents by slipping handwritten notes under a locked bedroom door. He left the house each morning before dawn and returned after dark, sometimes entering through the garage without a word. Friends described him as brilliant, polite, but unsettlingly aloof. He spoke 7 languages, studied physics, and allegedly worked covert jobs for unspecified government agencies. Still, on the Sunday police arrived, Charles was gone. Officers forced their way into his upstairs room and found shelves lined with nautical charts, Spanish dictionaries, and radio equipment humming faintly. A ceiling light had been rigged to give the illusion someone was home. A ham radio microphone rested on the desk, its mouthpiece warm, as though recently used. Freshly laundered bed sheets suggested he had slept there the previous night, but the closet hung empty and dresser drawers were bare. No passport, no wallet, no clothes. Charles had vanished, leaving behind only questions. You can almost hear detectives whispering, "Where's the trail?" They scoured bus depots, airports, and the Mexican border, yet no ticket stub or customs log carried Charles's name. Neighbors recalled hearing a loud vehicle pull away from the garage in the early morning hours of June 20th, but none could describe the driver. Police issued a warrant for Charles Rogers on suspicion of murder and flight to avoid prosecution. Newspapers splashed his bespectacled photo across front pages through the summer of 1965. But like a character who walks off stage and never returns, he slipped into legend. Let's rewind and examine the breadcrumbs Charles may have scattered before disappearing. First, motive. You ask, why would an intelligent middle-aged man butcher his own parents? Family acquaintances painted an unflattering portrait of household life. Fred was rumored to be verbally abusive and financially manipulative, controlling his son's bank accounts and intercepting his mail. Edwina allegedly forged Charles's signature on deeds to siphon his Navy paychecks. If that is true, resentment could have simmered for decades. Detectives uncovered ledgers hinting at secret oil field investments Charles funded, but never saw profits from. Did years of betrayal ignite the butcher's rage? Second, opportunity. Charles knew the house's layout intimately. He could have lured his parents into the kitchen under a benign pretext, surprised them with blunt force, and then used his intelligence to orchestrate a cleanup. Neighbors heard no screams, no gunshots. One theory suggests he struck Fred with a claw hammer in the living room, dragged him to the bathroom, then repeated the act when Edwina returned from visiting a relative. Blood spatter analysis supports separate assaults, but without a time of death window narrower than 24 hours, certainty stays just out of reach. Third, escape. Maps in his room focused on the Gulf of Mexico and coastal Mexican villages reachable by boat. Investigators believe Charles left Houston in his father's Ford sedan, abandoned it in the parking lot of Houston Hobby Airport to mislead police, then hitched a ride to the coast. From there, he may have hired shrimp boat captains who asked few questions and paid in cash. Contemporary tips placed him in Veracruz, speaking fluent Spanish. Others swore they bumped into him in Honduras, working as a geologist. None of those sightings were verified, but each keeps the mystery alive. As you weigh theories, you stumble on a twist worthy of a spy novel. Some authors argue Charles was involved in clandestine operations connected to the Bay of Pigs and even the Kennedy assassination. They claim his radio gear wasn't for hobby chatter, but coded intel traffic. In that storyline, killing his parents was merely the last step of a cover-up before extraction by government handlers. Does that sound far-fetched? Probably. Yet when official files leave gaps and a suspect literally evaporates, conspiracy has fertile ground. Before you dismiss the spy angle outright, consider this. The Rogers crime scene contained little forensic evidence, but it did include 3 unique objects: a blood-stained claw hammer, a pair of reading glasses that did not belong to Fred, and a key to Charles's locked toolbox. Inside the box, detectives found military-grade maps and photographs of South American airstrips. Why would a civilian geophysicist possess such items in 1965? Were they simply souvenirs, or were they actionable documents? Eyewitness memory can fade, but paper trails endure. Banking records suggest Charles withdrew nearly $5,000 over several weeks before the murders, the equivalent of $40,000 today. That sort of cash would buy a small vessel and months of supplies. Police also discovered he purchased a .22 caliber pistol and ammunition, neither of which surfaced at the house. Was the gun his escape insurance if the Coast Guard stopped him? Again, speculation thrives where evidence runs thin. Let's leave logistics behind and step back into that eerily quiet kitchen one more time. Imagine detectives opening the fridge, cataloguing each body part, and placing them into labeled bags. Picture them searching the pantry, expecting to find missing knives, but discovering every blade perfectly clean in its drawer. The killer not only wiped away gore, he restored normal order, almost as if mocking the idea of chaos. That psychological flourish haunts investigators even now. It says, "I remain in control. You can inventory my work, but you cannot track me down." The case file eventually grew cold. By 1975, Houston police reclassified Charles Rogers as a missing person, rather than an active fugitive, because no evidence placed him in the United States. In 1992, a court declared him legally dead, so the estate could be settled. Yet the declaration did nothing to soothe curiosity. True crime conferences feature his profile year after year. Armchair detectives start blogs, run DNA simulations, and request declassified documents. You have to wonder, do they pursue justice or chase the thrill of an unsolvable puzzle? Every so often, someone claims to hold the answer. A Texas private investigator published a book arguing Charles died in a Mexican jungle in 1975 after a bar fight. Another author claims he resurfaced under an alias in Melbourne, Australia, teaching advanced math until his death in 2010. Without fingerprints, photographs, or definitive DNA, those claims sit on a spectrum between hopeful and absurd. Still, they keep the narrative alive. And perhaps that is why the Icebox murders refuse to melt away into history. So where does that leave you, the modern listener? You may never handle crime scene photos or dust a refrigerator for prints, but you can still probe the edges of the story. Ask yourself why certain mysteries carve permanent grooves in the public imagination. Is it the brutality, the vanishing suspect, or the lingering sense that if someone could plan a crime so meticulously 58 years ago, maybe another person is planning one right now in your very neighborhood? If Charles Rogers were alive today, he would be well into his second century. Imagine him streaming this podcast from some anonymous coastal village, hearing the story told by a stranger, and smirking at the parts we get wrong. Does that possibility chill your spine, or does it thrill you? Mysteries invite both sensations, and the Icebox murders offer them in equal measure. You began this journey by opening a refrigerator door. You are closing it now, but the sound stays with you, a suctioning reminder that truth can be sealed away, kept cool, and preserved for decades. Maybe one day a new witness will swing that door wide and illuminate every dark corner of Charles Rogers' escape. Until then, the bungalow on Driscoll Street stands demolished, the lot replaced by modern townhomes, yet the legend lingers like a stubborn Texas summer. Remember this takeaway when the credits roll. Crime scenes tell stories, but silence can speak louder. The absence of footprints, the missing drips of blood, the neatly stacked limbs, all whisper the same message. Control is power, and power can vanish long before law catches up. Ask questions, stay curious, and never assume the obvious is the only answer. After all, somewhere out there, a mind planned the Icebox murders to perfection, and unless we keep searching, that mind wins. Isn't that reason enough to keep the fridge light on and the investigation alive?